All right, we all know that this weekend would have been the Clarence Mega Bass sponsored round of the Suffix Bass Pro Series. Of course, COVID has put the axe on that, but we thought what better than to get the person that's won the last two events in a row on that arena on the show tonight. Mike Nelson, welcome.
Hi, how you going, Steve?
Good, mate. You were probably the most pissed off angler in all of Australia when it came to having to postpone this tournament.
Oh, look, I was looking really forward to it, to be honest, but I was also a little bit stressed out too. There'd be a lot of expectation this weekend if we're up there, that's for sure.
That's so right, mate. You won three in a row. Everyone goes, I would have expected that. And if you didn't win, it's like, yeah, told you it was no good.
That's exactly right.
Mate, it's been a real golden arena for you there. Did you fish the Clarence before this run of a couple of events? Had you fished the Clarence before that? Was it somewhere you put in a lot of time, or does it just suit your fishing style?
The only real work I've done up there on the Clarence was in the Brim tournaments in the years prior to the bass rounds going into the rivers. So I haven't really done much. The first round I ever done there was the round before where Ross won it, and I just missed out on that one. I didn't quite catch my bag limit on there. Yeah. But it's very similar to the home waterway, which is the Manning. So there's a lot of natural rock walls. There's all that sort of stuff is all very similar. So it sort of feels very much like at home there. So I'm chasing bass in the little punt up in the rapids. But, so it really suits my style.
Now, tell us a little about the history. If people don't know about Mike Nelson, mate, what do you do Monday to Friday, and where do you live? Obviously down in that the Manning River area.
Yeah, so I live in Taree, and I work for the local Water and Sewer Authority, which is now part of a council now. And so I do IT, with communications and server infrastructure for the entire environment.
Nice, mate. So you get to work in the sanitation part, but you don't have to touch anything dirty. I like that.
No, we get the glamorous part.
And tell us about your bass fishing history. We've seen you in Brim and bass tournaments in the past. How much bass fishing have you done in your life? Have you done heaps, or have you just sort of dabbled in it and then just got good at it?
No, well, look, the Brim fishing was the main aim for many, many years growing up, sort of further downriver, fishing for flatties and Brim with the old man. But as that sort of took off, I expanded out into bass and did a bit of offshore fishing. But the bass in this area is sort of like our barramundi, so it hits harder, better strikes, better top water, does all the stuff the Brim does, but at sort of the next level. So the bass really was the priority in this area.
What is it in the water down at Taree? Because it spits out some of the best tournament fishing we've ever seen, and it's been doing so for about 20 years. There's been such legends of the sport come out of that place. In the old days, it was the Andy Howards back in the Brimmen days. Yep. Chris Hicksons and Russ Babacools, and there's just an endless number of people that have come out of that joint. What's in the water? You should know. It's part of your job.
Yeah, look, I don't know, mate. It's like the Manning sometimes can be a hard fishery, so maybe that's got something to do with it. You got to work a little bit harder. I don't know, but we've got lots of options down here as well, which is probably helps. We've got Brim, bass, we've got trout only an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So there's a whole lot of options here. So
yeah, you're all very good at a variety of species. Now, we've come to know you through the Clarence, and in the background here, we're going to have some of the highlights playing because you ran cameras for us on a couple of the days in your last couple of wins, which make a great keepsake for you when it comes to remembering your ABT tournament win. It's not just the big check here that you're not going to get your hands on. Yet. You've become known to us as a bit of a jig fisherman because you've used that tool to take the last couple of events out. I want you to give us a bit of a masterclass on jigging tonight. So if you were getting ready for the Clarence, what baits would you be packing? What tackle would you be packing? And what techniques would be going through your mind as what you're going to catch the fish on, mate? So I want you to educate me and all of our viewers tonight about how we can be better jig fishermen in the river.
Well, I mean, it's not all just jig fishing. It is definitely a tool that I like. It's quite versatile because you can use it almost like a plastic. You can fish it fast, slow, in timber, rocks, whatever. You don't get snagged either because they've got that good weed guard on them. Yep. A few little tricks on that to really, lock in that weedless sort of design. But this weekend I'll probably do similar to what I've done last. I'd cover, pretty much each end of the river and check out where the fish are and see if I can find any reasonable schools of the larger fish. They do tend to hang around together, but they can be spread out on the snag, so you've got to be a little bit patient with them at times.
Yeah. Well, take us through your pre-fish day then. If you were fishing a pre-fish day, what baits would you have tied on? And we know you'd cover a lot of water because you've got that very flash Phoenix powered by Mercury there that you run around in, mate, and we loved filming that in the grand final last year. From the drone, you were a bit of a gallery player there, mate, but what baits do you have tied on the pre-fish to find those fish?
Yeah, look, certainly I'll have a few different jigs. I'll have a sort of a 1/8 jig, and that's sort of for the real shallow stuff because you can use them, you can skip them up into the trees, into the snags, and you can sort of use them like a weedless plastic, you might say, but still get a fair bit of movement and fishing pretty quick without, wasting a lot of time. 3/8 jigs, and I'll probably have a half ounce as well tied up for that deeper water, like around that 20 to 30 feet or so. I'll have probably a Z-Man paddle tail of some description tied on, and a snake head or a weedless jig head.
Yep.
A couple of frogs. The Z-Man frogs are pretty good. Don't mind those. And that's really that's probably the main three that I'll throw for the bass. Anything outside of that is really circumstantial, really, but those three usually cover most of your bases.
Yep, and then you would work out on that practice day by covering some miles and covering some water, just where and when the fish are going to be, and you'd give yourself a bit of a priority of spots that you wanted to hit. Now, take us through, again, because the jig side of it is pretty new. I know the Z-Man frogs are pretty new as well, but I think a lot of people are really interested in how someone masters the jigs like you do. Take us through a couple of the jigs that you use and any modifications that you do on those baits to make them more attractive to the bass.
Righto, so we'll start with probably my favourite jig and probably what everyone's seen on those videos, which is the 3/8 motion jig in black. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, no, that's you can see that.
I'm sure everyone's probably seen them 1,000 times by now. I don't really do too many modifications. It's pretty good as is. The only thing I will do is spread out the weed guard a little bit, which will give you a bit more protection as that jig rolls over and through the timber and rock. It gives you a little bit more protection for that hook point. That's the main modification on that. Not much else to be done. And then just choose a trailer, whether that's I often just use a 3-inch black gulp grub or any other sort of gulp variation, which I might have laying around the boat at that stage. But ultimately, you can catch the bass just on the jig. You don't even need the trailers. I think the trailer is really only beneficial often when you're fishing them really slow and they're getting the smell in their face and they're not sure if they want to eat it. I think that gives them that little bit extra to attack it. That's for sure.
Now, what about when we watched Carl Jochimson win his Elite Series event last year? He was throwing big jigs and he was drowning them in scent. You don't add any extra scent to them?
Not particularly. No. The gulps I find have got enough scent. Anything else that you might put on might stick the trailers together, which sort of reduces the action of the lure. But by using the gulps, you also don't have to keep spraying scent on them every second cast as well. So more often you got the jig in the water, you'll catch the fish.
Yeah, no worries. Now that's the same model of jig all the way through, or do you use a different model for the different weights?
Well, the motion jigs, they're mainly a lighter weight, so I think it's a 1/4 ounce and a 3/8. If we're going up to the 20-foot mark, 30 feet of water, 40 feet or so, I'll swap over to the Equip hybrid jig, which is a little bit different design, still basically a similar thing, just a little bit heavier to get down quicker if that's where the fish are.
Yeah, and do you do the same thing by splaying those weed guards?
Yeah, same thing. I'll squeeze them out just a little bit, just so in case that rolls over the tree or whatever, you won't grab the side of the hook.
Do you splay the weed guards just by hand, or do you use a tool to do that?
No, pretty much just squish it with the old finger there and lay them back down so you get that nice spread.
Nice. All right, so it's pretty easy. Then you whack your same sort of trailer on and away you go. Tell us about the tackle that you fish a jig on, because there's no 2-pound fluorocarbon going on with those guys, mate. You got to leave the brimming gear at home, don't you? Yeah,
that's exactly right. And especially with the jigs, the places you can get those things, if you're not fishing something pretty heavy, you're going to lose a lot of fish, that's for sure. So probably the favourite jig rod at the moment, it's a little bit left of field because a lot of people will use a longer rod for the jigs, but with the amount of river fishing I do, the shorter rod is actually beneficial for me because often I will skip those under trees and around things. So a bit shorter rod is actually pretty good for me. Probably my favourite one is the Muse Black by 13.
Yep.
That is a bit of a heavier rod. It's a 6 to 12 pounds, so it's not it's heavy, but it's not ridiculous, you know, so it's still got plenty of sensitivity, so you can feel those real light little plucks that the bass will sometime, you know, occasionally they'll hit it hard, they'll suck it in on one hit, but often they'll just peck at that lure like a little brim.
Now, we noticed that in your highlights that the rod, it does look a little bit shorter, and you don't like that net, mate. If it's got that hook in the mouth, you like poling it in, don't you? And you obviously need heavy, shorter braid and leader to do that.
Yeah, look, I figured if you're pulling the fish out of snags that hard with locked up drag, you can probably lift them into the boat. I probably lost less fish doing that than worrying about grabbing the net, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty much to add up the combo, the reel is a 13 0, which is Concept 0, which is no ball bearings, really nice reel to use, super smooth, casts a mile, 10 kilos of drag, which is, well, plenty because I don't really use it. You just lock it right up, especially with the jigs. And then 15-pound Daiwa J-braid.
And that's the J-braid 4 or the 8?
The 8 strand. Yeah.
So the smooth stuff. And then what sort of leader do you tip that with?
The Gamma Fluorocarbon. I know it's a little bit hard to get these days, but it's probably the best one I've found. You can rub that stuff over rocks, branches and stuff. It might scuff it a little bit, but it doesn't break. And that's the key, because these jigs, sometimes you're that deep in the timber, you know, you just, when you hammer that hook home and you reef that fish in, they come bouncing through the timber and you don't have to worry about busting your leader.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you hook them deep in structure, there's no extra hooks. If there's a hook in the bass's mouth, it's not like a crankbait or a top water or something that's got that extra hook hanging around waiting to catch on a bit of snag or something like that. So I suppose if you are deep in country and it doesn't come out the first pull, you can be patient, can't you? Those things you can sort of, they untangle themselves sometimes.
Yeah, quite often. Like if you hit them hard enough, they generally will come out 90% of the time. Before they know it, they're already bounced over a few logs and they're out. But yeah, if they do occasionally get a hook up, it's just a bit of a 50-50. You will lose a fish if they get snagged on a tree occasionally. They can tend to pop those jigs out of their mouth. But bit of a 50-50 if you get snagged up.
Awesome, mate. So we've got the jig sorted, we've got the tackle sorted, and we've got a fair idea of where you're casting to. Give the guys that are watching this a tip on the retrieval of the jig. Like, you don't burn that thing back to the boat, that's for sure.
Not particularly, no, but I do like to fish it a little quick on occasion. It's really just a mix up on the location you're fishing, right? So, quite often if you're fishing a bit of a shallower water, you'll go to the lighter jig. And if you can get it in close to that timber, often the bass will actually hit it on the drop. So you'll feel that tip and you just set that hook and you've got them straight up. Otherwise, they've seen it and they'll probably chase it down. Once it hits the bottom, give it a little rattle, give it a bit of a shake. If you don't get any interest, you can fish it really slow. You can keep doing that all the way back to the boat. But what I often like to do is actually lift that rod and sort of swim that jig, say a meter, get it moving, because bass obviously like movement more than brim or whatever. And then once again, sit it, move it, sit it, move it. And if you get a bit of a pluck or a bit of interest, then you can start shaking it to get them to eat the jig. But that's one of the tricks, is swim the jig. Often you'll bounce over a rock or a bit of timber under the water. That's probably where the fish is going to be sitting. And then you can lift it over that log or that rock and entice that bite. Certainly if they're a little bit slow, that'll really trigger them to have a go at the jig, that's for sure.
Well, you're nearly hitting the fish in the head, aren't you? If there's a deep down snag in 20 foot of water and there's a fish sitting next to it and you crawled it over the snag, you're nearly dropping it on top of his head, and that's going to get some sort of reaction, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Like anything like that, you're banging that heavy jig into the timber that's their home, and they're getting a bit upset with that, and quite often they'll bite it.
Now, let's talk about the jig bite. And again, the guys that are watching this that haven't fished a jig maybe aren't aware of how softly a fish can bite a jig. Like, for sure, you can feel a fish, pluck or tap a jig as they eat it violently, but explain the softest jig bite you've ever got, because they're not uncommon, are they? The lines swimming away jig bites.
No, that's right. So if it's a bit of a slow day and you're daydreaming a little bit, you'll often cast in, and the fish will hit that lure as it's sinking and swim directly at you. So you don't even notice what's happening until you lift your rod and you're going to sort of work that jig. Next minute, your line's underneath your boat and there's a fish on it. So it can be as light as that sometimes.
I think there's a real parallel between how people fish jigs and how people fish cranker crabs in the salt. Like, if you fish them too fast, you're a danger of maybe not getting the bites that you could get. So my parallel is a good cranker crab fisherman in the salt, which is what you are, can parlay into a good jig fisherman in the fresh. You just need to remember to swing that rod a bit harder when you're setting that hook.
Yeah, and that is actually the key. You've got to swing that rod pretty hard so you can squash down those weed guards and get that hook in, that's for sure. That is a big part of hooking those fish.
Again, if there are people watching this show that are trying to get their confidence up on jigs, what is your number one piece of advice for these guys to turn them from a clueless jig fisherman into someone that's getting honed in and knows what to do? What's your number one bit of advice?
Yeah, look, if you fish an area that you know and you've caught plenty of bass there before, grab a jig, put a trailer on it, maybe start with a lighter jig, maybe the 1/8 or a 1/4 ounce, something like that, something a little bit more that represents a plastic. Flip it in and just almost fish it like a plastic, but slow it down a little bit. Don't be scared of getting your jig right in the timber, dragging it over those branches one by one. Quite often, if you get hung up on a branch underneath, you can just shake it off and the bass will eat it off the branch. So just fish it slow, fish it in the timber, but don't be scared to get it right in there. That's probably the biggest key.
That's awesome, mate. And we really appreciate tonight your sharing of the techniques. Of course, ABT's motto is who shares wins. Let's assume that the Bass Tour may get going sometime later this year. How many events had you planned to fish this year? Obviously, I assume you're going to go to the Clarence and give it a bit of a whack.
Yes.
Have you planned any more events for this year? Maybe get up to Queensland and have a crack at that AOY?
Yeah, I was pretty keen. I'd sort of checked in for Kenya. So we had a little house lined up there with Jimmy Hickson and the boys and Chris and everyone. So I was going to do that. Wivenhoe was interesting. I've driven past it, never fished on it. That was a possibility, but probably Kenya was the big one, and then all the New South Wales rounds as well, of course.
Yeah. Well, like everyone else in ABT, we're just hoping that we can get on top of this virus quickly and contain it, eliminate it. And I suppose for tournament guys, it's not just the ability to go tournament fishing, like frivolous fishing, not fishing for a feed, but it's also able to cross state lines, because if we can do it at the moment, it's probably a 5-week trip, mate, couple of weeks quarantine when you get in, a couple of weeks quarantine when you get back. So probably not worth it for the small payouts that we got, you know. So we're hoping that towards the end of the year we can get something going. Of course, in the Bass Pro Series this year, we're giving away a fantastic bluefin boat with a 115 horsepower motor on the back, on a trailer with lithium batteries and the whole kit and caboodle, mate. It's a pretty flash bit of kit, mate, and let's just have a little moment's silence about the Clarence this weekend, because we're not going to be there. Okay, we're over it now, mate. Thanks very much tonight, mate. Have you got any sponsors that you want to thank and give a shout out to on this Friday night?
Well, 13 Fishing has been helping me for a few years now, so they're the main clue in the bass round, and also got a shout out to the boys at Manning River Marine, because they hooked me up with a lot of tackle. They look after my boat. I get a lot of good support from those guys as well. So thanks to them.
That's it, mate. How good is Cole on the spanners, mate? He's all right. He can keep he's fitted many motors for me over the years, and if I'm going past, I'll get a service of those guys. He's a whiz, isn't he? Yeah,
I wouldn't take my boat anywhere else. They certainly know what they're doing.
And a little bit of a warning for those guys looking to go to Manning River Marine. For God's sake, don't walk into the tackle shop. Like, a $200 service turns into a $1,000 day pretty bloody easy, doesn't it?
They've got every brim lure, every bass, cod, everything you'll ever need is in that shop.
And you got Chris Hickson sitting there just encouraging you gently to buy all of them. So, no, it's a great place to visit. If you pull in there, Jimmy makes you a cup of tea, Chris empties your wallet, Cole services your boat. What else could you want?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome, mate. Well, really appreciate you joining us tonight, mate, and let's hope that we can get on the water again on the Clarence pretty soon and get yourself a bit of a 3P.
It'd be amazing, that's for sure.